If you ask one of the children in this congregation what it's like to grow up Unitarian Universalist, they will probably tell you it can be a religiously confusing experience to grow up UU. I remember in my 5th grade elementary school classroom, we were studying world religions, and I chose to study Unitarian Universalism, both for evangelist purposes, but also in an attempt to really understand what was happening in my Sunday school, in our theology. And on the final day of our world religions unit, we had a party, and people were invited to bring foods that were used in the religion they had studied. You know where this is going. We invited our families to the lunch, and it was a big deal. And the spread was a cornucopia of different ethnic foods. We had matzah and charoset. We had hot cross buns, falafel and tabbouleh, lamb pockets, baba ganoush, African peanut stew, dumplings, and mooncakes. After scratching my head for a while and finally shrugging my shoulders, I showed up to the luncheon with my best attempt at Unitarian Universalist sacred foods: a carafe of coffee and 3 dozen donuts. Jason mentioned sacrament earlier in the service. Now, from my child's perspective, the frenzied way the adults stormed the donut table as soon as worship let out, well, that was ritual to me. Their constant praise of coffee was as good a sacrament as any. Trying to systematize, to understand UU theology, our culture, our rituals, and our foods can be a confusing project, especially when the first source of our faith demands we consider our direct experience of wonder and mystery as vital to our faith and our theology. Well, that could lead us almost anywhere. And you'd think as a people we would be more comfortable with mystery by now. But resting in mystery, finding power and even delight in the journey towards understanding, towards knowing, that can be a difficult place for us to live for too long. Intellectually, we would rather affirm that all can be known and understood. Spiritually, at times, I think even we yearn for a simpler life where there are more answers than questions. As a teenager, I envied my Southern Baptist and Catholic and Jewish friends, so confident in their knowing, while I was offered this restless spirit, never satisfied. But Unitarian Universalist faith is not a destination, nor a walled garden. It is a doorway. I said our Unitarian Universalist faith, it's not a destination, nor a walled garden. It is a doorway. My colleague, UU minister Reverend Aaron White, preached about a phenomenal story of one woman's journey through uncertainty and the spiritual restlessness she had to face. Have you ever heard of Deborah Searle? Has anyone ever heard of Deborah Searle? This is not rhetorical. Okay, good. Deborah Searle is a modern-day explorer. She's a white British woman who was a competitive athlete and a world adventurer with sponsorships. And in 2002, Deb and her then-husband Andrew entered the Ward Evans Atlantic Rowing Challenge. That's a 3,000-mile double-handed rowing race from the Canary Islands of Spain all the way to Barbados. The challenge included building your own plywood boat from a flat-pack kit, kind of like the thing you might get at IKEA. Now, Searle's story is particularly interesting to me because she is a twin, and her twin sister is also her manager for her epic adventures and subsequent speaking engagements. I have twin sons, so I'm always attuned to twin stories. We'll come back to her twin in a minute. At the time of this cross-Atlantic rowing challenge, Searle was a novice rower. In fact, she had never rowed before. And she and her husband trained a few months before the race on the River Thames. This turned out not to be a great testing ground for this race because shortly after embarking on their voyage across the Atlantic, it became clear that Andrew suffered from a debilitating fear of open water. After 7 days of crippling fear, anxiety, illness, resulting in severe weight loss, Andrew had to be rescued. And Deborah decided to complete the race alone. All told, she spent 111 days rowing on the open water. As Reverend White points out, in every hero's journey, the hero faces friends and foes alike. Deb found friends in sea turtles and incandescent jellyfish and other incredible wildlife encounters. But unfortunately, her foes were copious. She dealt with sharks. Even some of the turtle encounters threatened her boat's integrity. There were hurricanes trying to kill her and demoralizing trade winds that would swiftly undo 20 miles in a few short hours, setting her back at least 3 days or more. The colossal cross-Atlantic container ships, well, they were simply not looking out for a woman in a rowboat. And they created terrifying waves that threatened to capsize her. And of course, there was the loneliness and the rigorous pace of completing a distance meant for 2 rowers. She had to consume 8,000 calories per day. In order to keep up with the fuel she was expending by rowing, she could only sleep about 20 minutes at a time. After a couple of months of this, well, she was worn down. She didn't want to be out there anymore. She wanted to go home. One morning, she wrote her fear in her diary, and she wrote really honestly that she felt she would not make it, and she was nearing the end of her journey. And these journal entries were all up on her website that her family and her friends and her supporters were following. And so she got a call on her satellite, on her very expensive satellite phone, from her twin sister, Haley, who project managed her challenge, and said, "I want you to know, Deb," Haley said, "we saw what you wrote, we all saw it, but we're just not ready to give up on this yet." Deb said, "What do you mean you're not ready?" Her sister said, "Well, it's a team effort, isn't it?" And Deb said, No, I don't, doesn't really feel like that. Haley said, "Just tell us the problems. We will help you with the solutions." And Deb says now that since that race, she asks for help so much more now. It's completely changed her life. She's no longer timid or afraid to ask for help. In fact, it's a skill she's honed. And at that particular moment in time, well, she was depressed about missing Christmas because it was just a couple of weeks away. And they said, "Don't worry, we will make Christmas happen for you." And so a big boat came by and dropped a full Christmas care package with decorations and Christmas pudding. And Deb had the most peaceful, non-chaotic, Christ-like Christmas she had ever experienced. They found a way to connect her diary entries to readers from around the world and to link their responses to her satellite phone she had, so she could see everyone's text messages of encouragement to her. And these words, they were free, they cost nothing. Years later, this still challenges Deb to consider her use of her free words. She gets to choose how to use them every day. These words were healing, and they stopped the extreme loneliness and the fear. But even so, near the end, it got really difficult. There was one moment out there in the open water that was just crucial to her ability to continue her journey through the unknown. She made a desperate phone call to her twin sister, feeling terrorized by all of her foes, particularly the enormous container ships, creating these waves that nearly capsized her. And her sister said something to her. She said, "You know, Debs, you've just got to change your attitude." Change her attitude? Deb wanted to punch her for saying this. But the more she kept thinking about it, and this is what she had time to do, those 3 words, when it came to it, well, there was nothing else she could change or control. She couldn't control hurricanes, nor container ships, nor being blown back 30 miles. So at breakfast, she would talk to herself. I'm forgetting the name of the movie again, the Tom Hanks movie, Castaway. Much like Castaway, she said it's very accurate, that movie, because she did have a teddy bear that she ended up talking to. And so she would talk to that teddy bear and say, "Choose your attitude." And negative attitudes were not allowed on the boat, so that could not be one of the choices. In her own words, Deb recalls, "I didn't have a choice about experiencing setbacks, but I did have a choice about how I responded to those setbacks. But it wasn't enough, really, to have a motivational phrase. I needed to put it to work. Come on, choose your attitude. Which one will it be today? Today's attitude will be one of, okay, optimism. And then the next bit was to list all the reasons I had to be optimistic. And by the end of the breakfast, well, I would start to feel quite optimistic. And I believe it made a difference out there. I believe that is what got me through the unknown. Because when it comes to dealing with changes that we will never choose, if we can choose our attitude, then there is real hope to get over some of those hurdles. Now, the last thing Deb used to get her through the pendulum swing of momentum followed by setback, and momentum followed by setback, which, by the way, is the same pendulum of any project that is monumental, that is of worth. Well, the last thing she used to get through was to picture the moment when she would finish the race and see her family. She played the image like a movie, imagining the way it would feel to hug each member of her family, the way their faces would smell, the things they would say to each other. During her most hellish moments, she would carefully and with great detail imagine the moment of entering heaven. You understand we are on that boat, right? You understand that? I mean, we are, right at this minute, sitting in open water. Like Deb, we're not totally alone. We can help each other through. We can send messages, speak words of encouragement to one another. And we can picture ourselves landing in that new building when we get there, the morning light streaming through as we walk in on a Sunday, connecting us with holy beauty and abundant space, enough for all of us. And of course, to be an American this week, amongst many weeks, is also to sit in that boat in open water with friends and foes at all sides, wondering when or how we will ever get to that promised land, if we can ever begin to trust in a democracy again, or be led by an administration with a sense of moral humility or even values. We are in open water. And the pendulum swings. We work hard to push the needle forward, to make efforts towards more humane policies. And then the trade winds push us back, and we are lost at sea once again. It's a good thing we can choose our attitudes for how we will get through this each and every day. It's also a good thing that a long time ago, some people got together and wrote a book just for this sort of thing. Being lost in open waters of spiritual wilderness and suffering the leadership of unjust and inhumane despots. You know, when Moses first encounters God, yes, the Bible, that's the book. When Moses first encounters God in the book of Exodus, and God gives Moses instructions for leading his people out of Egypt, Moses really struggles with spiritual restlessness, with the mystery. And he says, well, first, why don't you tell me what your name is? And God says, you want to know my name? I am what I am. My name is I am. Or, as the Hebrew translation, I am what is becoming. I am what was, is, and will be. I am what I am, Moses. Now let us go forth from Egypt. And when Moses gets to the water's edge, the way this moment has been interpreted in the rabbinical tradition is not that the river parted all at once as it did for Charlton Heston, but that the water parted only as far as Moses was willing to step. Took a step, and then it's uncertain. He took another step, and it was uncertain. He took another step, and it's uncertain, and so on, and so forth, until they reach the other side. This is how life can feel. Collectively, this is how it is to be feeling our way into our congregation's future, into our nation's future. This is how we find ourselves living now. And like Reverend Aaron White, I know that when life has felt the most mysterious and confusing, and I have felt that restlessness of spirit, knowing that there was somewhere I ought to be, but I didn't know how to get there, often the waters have parted one step at a time at best. Now, I thought that in preparation for this sermon that I would be talking about Buddhism and exploring Buddhism. However, after reading a lot of Thich Nhat Hanh, Pema Chodron, other Buddhist thinkers, I think I figured out why I'm not a Buddhist, why it wasn't working for me to get us through spiritual restlessness. It's because I do not have much stake in individual enlightenment. See, I believe in collective enlightenment. In that way, I am like the shepherd, overly worried about you and every lost sheep. This is why if I haven't seen you in church lately, I miss you. This is why in the realm of social justice, I believe that without equal interchange, without true solidarity, we are doing more harm than good when we act out of paternalism and even charity. With the goal of solidarity, our action and our service become authentically interconnected because my salvation is tied up with your salvation. And our destiny is one shared destiny. So no, I do not trust in personal enlightenment. I mean, you should probably work on that also. But if we are to choose our attitude each day, sitting in open water in the same boat, and we are going to make that choice both individually and collectively. Now, we have spoken before in this worship series about the power of liminal space. That's the space in between. Sitting in the in-between space offers tremendous power to us. Anthropologist Victor Turner explored liminality in his seminal work, The Ritual Process, developing the phenomenon of communitas. I want to talk about communitas for 1 minute. Communitas refers to a collective experience that becomes possible when a whole group of people cross a threshold and together enter liminal time and space, an in-between time that is neither past nor present, and a space that is neither here nor there. And in this threshold space, they experience a special bond, and it is not like any bond they experience in their ordinary, structured lives. Victor Turner describes what is sought in communitas. It is not effortless companionship that can arise between friends, coworkers, any day. What they seek is a transformative experience that goes to the root of each person's being and finds in that root something profoundly communal and shared. Reverend Tina Kansler-Clark reminds us communitas is not the same as community. Communitas is a process where no one is marginalized because everyone is on the margin. So communitas is not simply social interaction. It is not simply belonging to a group. It is a social and a soulful connection. And that's where we find ourselves now. To liberate our dreams and traverse the open seas of our life and our congregation's life, we will need to gather our spiritual resources. And so we can look to Deborah Searle's journey to help us navigate. First, we must choose our attitude for how we will approach each day. Next, we must reach out, ask each other for help when we need it, and there we will find more abundance than we thought possible. And finally, we must envision our moment of arrival, painting a picture in our minds so clear we can touch it. There's a saying amongst clergy that it is easier to describe the features of hell than the kingdom of heaven. And so we look to the poets and the artists and the musicians to help us with our description. And then all that has divided us will merge. And then compassion will be wedded to power. And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then both men and women will be gentle. And then both women and men will be strong. And then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then we will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then we will all care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life's creatures. And then we will all live in harmony with each other and the earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again.